Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are new to my channel, my name is Juliana and today I'm going to be doing the eyeshadow palette tag part 2. This tag, as well as the first part, was created by Ali Glines and Samantha March. I will link their channels or their videos in my description section. I was also tagged them by Lonette from LBD Beauty into doing this video. So Lonette, thank you for the tag. So without further ado, let's find out about my eyeshadow palettes. Alright, the first prompt is my all-time favorite palette, and that's none other than the Cake palette. I mean, if you're not new to my channel, then you know that this is my favorite. This is my all-time favorite, and it's a gorgeous palette. This is the Cake palette. I love colors, and this palette screams color. It doesn't just scream color, it screams the color I like. Every time I look at this palette, I just see the explosion of colors, and it just makes me happy. It is so beautiful. Yeah, the Cake palette is my all-time favorite. Moving on to the second prompt, and that is my new favorite palette, and is none other than the Swatch palette. The day this palette came out, I've never bought a palette as quickly as I bought this palette. I've heard of the Blends palette for a long time, but it was an all matte palette, so I was never bothered. But when I saw the Swatch palette, this palette, I ran to the website to order one, and honestly, I have not regretted it. In fact, I'm pretty much sure when I hit pan on this palette, or if it expires, I would definitely buy another one. This is an explosion of color, and it's so similar to my all-time favorite as well, which does make sense, you know, as to what I see in this palette. But I have an extra love for the Swatch palette just because of this row here. It is gorgeous. This palette is so beautiful. I mean, the fact that you can use it according to rows and you can use according to columns, honestly, it is beautiful. The depth of the color, the lightness of the colors, you know, every row has its own purpose. It's just fantastic. It's such a beautifully curated palette. So this is my new favorite palette. The third prompt, palette for the memories. I've actually got two in this category. One of them, at the moment, I don't know where it is because it's such an old palette. Because of what it means to me, I just kept it somewhere which I can't find at the moment. I'm hoping that you can see a picture of the palette. It's the Urban Decay. I don't know if you remember this little palette from Urban Decay. I think it had about 12 shades or 16 shades, but it were like little tiny pans, and it had like a flip over cover. Hopefully I'm showing you the picture. That palette was the palette I used in the last personal picture I took with my dad, which was about what, 4-5 years ago. I mean, obviously I saw him after that, but we never took any personal pictures. So I took pictures with my other siblings, with my kids, with my family, but we never really got a chance because it was my mom's birthday. We never really got a chance to take a personal picture together. So that picture happened to be my last one, and every time I look at that picture, I remember the palette I had on my eyes, you know, in that picture. So for me, I could never throw away that palette. So that's one for the memories. The second one is P. Louise Secret Sinner palette. This palette holds so much memory for me because for me, it was a turning point in my makeup history, I would like to say. Before I bought this palette, for me, the most expensive palette was Urban Decay palette. I felt that they were luxurious then with the price, you know, with the feel of the palette. I felt that was luxurious, and I wouldn't even dare think of owning a Natasha Denona palette or a Mcgrath palette. I would just literally look at you and scream as an how on earth can you spend that much money on a palette? So I've always thought I don't need those palettes. I'm okay with Revolution Beauty, copies of other palettes, and the occasional Urban Decay, you know, treating myself two-faced. I thought they were like the upper end for me at that point until I used the Secret Sinner palette. And let me just tell you, using this palette, the formula of this palette, I just knew that that was a turning point for me. No more Revolution Beauty, and just that quality matters because the formula in this palette, literally, it melts on the eyes. I mean, the first time I applied it on my eyes, I just could not believe it. I could not believe how it felt. It literally blended itself. It just diffused on my lid. It was just beautiful. The formula of this palette and every of P. Louise palettes, it's so underrated. I mean, the brand is so underrated. I know, I mean, she has things, you know, issues with her name and what she's done, but the formula of her palettes are just so beautiful. So this was definitely a turning point for me. After this palette was when I bought Mcgrath, and I then bought Natasha Denona. So the difference between what an eyeshadow is and what an eyeshadow should feel like. The Secret Sinner palette was a turning point for me in my makeup history. Right, that takes us to the next prompt, which is the most underrated palette. So I'm going to go for brand this time around, and that is E-Unique. E-Unique, I've always said it in any video as much as I can say it. This is a brand that is so much underrated, and I don't know why. The only thing I can pinpoint is the fact that they are based in the UK, but I really don't know why they are not the talk of, you know, of a lot of people. There's so many brands that are so popular that their quality is not as good as E-Unique, and these are some of their shadows, and honestly they are foil like. They are beautiful. So these are the 3 shimmers in the palette I just showed you now, and just look at the quality of the shimmer. Look at that. Look how gorgeous and beautiful that is, and all of their palettes are like that. It's mostly 3 shimmers and 3 mattes. Some of them will be topper shades, and the topper shades will be duochromes. Honestly, they are beautiful and the quality is excellent. So it's not just that, oh, the shimmer or the metallics look shiny. They've got good quality as well. Honestly, I just don't know why they're underrated, and they're also a black owned brand, so I don't know why people are not talking so much about them. But for me, yeah, all Unique and all of their palettes are underrated. Okay, moving on to the next prompt, which is not a favorite but can't get rid of. That's got to go to Mothership 7, Mcgrath Mothership 7. This is Divine Rose 1, and it's just honestly, if I'm gonna be truthful, one of the most boring palettes ever. I know that maybe for some skin tones, maybe it pops for them and it's one of their favorite palettes or whatever, but for me, this is the most boring, at least definitely one of the most boring palettes ever. With the Mothership palette, sometimes I might not even like the matte, but the special shades will pull me in. Like Mothership 1, I don't like the mattes. Well, previously I didn't like all the mattes because they were cool tones, but the 4 special shades, they were magical. This one, the mattes, the special shades, they are just all meh. Honestly, this palette is just so boring. I mean, if you own a Mcgrath palette, a Mothership palette, or you've seen a swatch, you know what they feel like. These are the swatches of the 4 special shade, and to me it's just I mean, for a start, I can't really see much difference between the 4 shades. I mean, yeah, maybe these 2 are slightly different, but this 2 is like, where is the difference? They're more or less the same thing. I mean, for that amount of money, to me it's just one of the most boring palette. But the problem is I cannot get rid of it. For me, eyeshadow palettes is like Pokemon game. It's like, especially when I like a brand, I have to have all the palettes. It's like a collection for me. It's like Pokemon, I've got to chase them all, I've got to have them all. So I can't just imagine getting rid of this palette, giving it to somebody or whatever. I will feel it's like an OCD thing. I will feel it that something is missing out of the whole collection. I have all the 9 Mothership palettes, so to get rid of one of them is just like, I just can't do it. It's the same reason why I bought Mothership 1, which was one of the last palettes I bought. I really didn't want to buy that palette, but it was really bugging me that I was the only one I didn't have, that eventually I had to buy it. So yeah, I could never get rid of this. It's gonna stay like that probably until I get rid of all the others. The 6th prompt, my favorite collab. So my favorite collab, I've got to give it to Annette's Makeup Corner and Oden's Eye Cosmetics, but that palette is out of stock, and I don't think they're ever going to bring it back according to what they've said. Now, don't get it twisted. Out of the 3 palettes that they came out with, Tina's palette is my favorite, but it's not my favorite collab. So in the absence of Annette's palette being available, I'm going to go for Jackie Aina's collab. So this is Jackie Aina's palette with ABH, and I love this palette. I mean, if you look closely, you can see dents in some of the shades. Now, I have so many eyeshadow palettes that if I make a dent in any of my palette, know that I love that palette. There was a time when during the week, at least 3 days of the week, this is the palette I would always use, and it's because it's so versatile. It's got so many options that you can go for. So you can go for the purples, you can go for the reds, you can go for the browns, and this shimmer, oh my days, is so beautiful. When you mix it with other shades, it come out with a different effect. So if you use it with the purple, or you use it with the brown, or you use it with the orange, you get a different effect every single time. This palette, was well curated, it was well formed, it was just gorgeous. I mean, I loved it to the point that when they had some 50% sale, I even got a backup of this palette. That's how much I love this collab. Yeah, so this is my favorite collab. Seventh prompt is my favorite palette from 2021. So this is going to be getting quite repetitive. So such palette is my favorite from 2021. I mean, for the same reason I've mentioned earlier, it is just a perfect palette. A perfect palette, as in no complaints, no, I won't even change anything. This palette is perfect. She made this palette in fact, in an absolutely wonderful way. This palette is so beautiful. I mean, I can't even say much. I've already said all, but I've said it all. This is my favorite palette from 2021. A palette I didn't expect to love, and that is Natasha Denona's Retro palette. This palette, if you know me, it's just not me at all. I love colors. I love flashy colors. And even if it's not a colorful palette, the shimmers have got to be colorful. I just love colorful. I love shimmers that kind of melt on my lid, are beautiful. Those are the kind of palette I love. But for whatever reason, when this palette came out, I just can't I still can't explain why I love it, apart from the fact that maybe because of the burgundy. Red is my favorite shade. Any variation of red I love, absolutely love. Blue red, whatever red, pink red, brown red, give me any red any day, anytime. I love it. So that could be why I really love this palette. Apart from the burgundy shade in this palette, even all the other tones are so beautiful. I'm not a pink person, but for me, the way this palette has been put together just make it so appealing to me. It's such a beautiful palette. Honestly, so gorgeous. I mean, for me, I feel like this is the palette that should have been named Glam, because it screams glam to me. I don't know about anybody else, but I love the rosy, the mauvey, the auburn tones, the burgundy tones, all of the reddish whatever tones, pinkish tones. I just love it about this palette. So it's definitely one that I wasn't expecting to love, but I absolutely love. Palette that sparks joy, I have got to give it to the Infinity palette. In fact, I've got two palettes I'm going to show you. I've got to give it to the Infinity palette first of all. They are, I believe, 14 in total. I have about 13 of them. These palettes are beautiful. The shimmers in them are special. They are sparkly and they are just so beautiful and yummy. So these are them. I already have a video swatching all of these palettes on my channel, but they are beautiful. So if you don't know what they feel like, I will link that video to this. Those shimmers, oh, let me just swatch one of them. Alright, I did across 4 different palettes. So these are shimmers, one shimmer each from 4 different palettes. And look at that. Look at that. That is gorgeous, beautiful, sparkly, and they just make me smile and happy. Honestly, no matter how much of a bad mood I'm in, when I swatch this kind of shimmers, oh, everything just melts. Everything just melts. They are sparkly and they definitely bring me joy. The other palette in this category again goes to Pimby, and this is the Relentless palette. This palette has 3 giant duochrome shades. Look at that. These 3, they are alone to buy this palette. I mean, I got this palette on a 40% off, so for me, it was really worth it for these 3 sheets. I mean, there's some shimmers here, and I'm not looking at that. Let's concentrate on these 3 duochromes. I mean, look how gigantic they are, and they are gorgeous. Just look at the duochrome. So I don't know if you can see the shift, but I can see the shift physically. I don't know if you can see it on the screen, but they are absolutely beautiful and just breathtaking. Honestly, this is on dry hand, no glitter primer or anything like that. Can you see that? Don't know if you can see the shift. Oh yeah, it is there, that I promise you. But they are magical. These 3 shades, so magical. Have you ever seen anything so beautiful? That is absolutely beautiful and sparkly palette. So definitely Relentless palette is one of the palette that sparks joy for me. Okay, my newest eyeshadow palette. Now, if I had filmed this about, well, 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, or the time I was supposed to film this, the Relentless palette I just showed you would have been my newest palette. But since then, I've had another Pimby palette delivered. So this is my newest palette. And this is the Athlete Desire palette from Playing in Makeup by Yolando. Now, this palette, the only thing that made me get it are the shimmers, because if you know me, I'm not a neutral tone person. I don't even do a typical neutral tone looks. but these shimmers, when I saw them, I was just so drawn to them for whatever reason that there is. But yeah, they are the one that got me to get this palette, and I'm just gonna swatch the shimmers for you. Alright, this one in the middle is a duochrome, so swatching the four. That was the only reason why I got this palette, and the fact that also the brown tones or the tones are a little bit different, plus it has a black in it. I mean, look at the browns, they are so different in terms of undertone, and it's just a complete palette really if you're looking for something, you know, something less screamy, if you like something that won't scream so much in your face. But have I got other neutral palettes? Definitely yes, definitely. I've got quite beautiful neutral palettes, even though all my neutral palettes always have some sort of pop of color. So I have like neutral palette that might have a pop of blue, a pop of green, but they're always having some sort of colorful matte in them. So this is possibly the first palette I would have that is a neutral palette, but all of the tones are browns and black apart from the shimmer shades. But do I regret buying any? Low-key. Low-key. But we just have to see. I haven't used the palette yet. Once I use it, it might be worth it. I don't know. But yeah, I'm not mad at it for the shimmers. I'm not mad at it, but I probably could have done without this. Well, this is my newest palette. The 11th and final prompt is the first palette I used in 2022, and unfortunately there are 3 palettes. I don't tend to use one palette when I'm doing my looks, especially if I'm not filming that look. I always tend to use at least 2, 3, 4 palettes sometimes. So these are the 3 palettes I used for my first look in 2022. So I'm hoping I'm showing you the eyeshadow look I did. So I mainly focused on these pinks here, these 2 shimmers, well, special shades really in this palette. Those are the 2 shades I focused on for the look, but it was one of the palettes I used. But this palette is beautiful. I wasn't expecting it to be this beautiful. Now, I was angry at the time that it came out. I wanted like better, different tones of matte, if you like, but for the special shades and the shimmers in this palette is absolutely gorgeous. So if you can get it on a sale, definitely worth it. And I also used it with the blends and the Surge palette. For me, when it comes to the blends palette, I usually like, if I'm going for like a darker shade, that's when I pick up the blends palette, because it's hardly got any fallout. I always do my base before I do my eyeshadow. So whenever I'm using any dark shade, I tend to go for the blends palette, and for that look I kind of went in this region, so your pinks and your purples, so I had to dig into this palette. And in the Surge palette, the only shade I did use was the black. This is the only black I've ever found that gives no fallout. I've never seen something like this before. This black is blacker than black, and it does not give you any fallout. It melts on the eyes. It's not like, oh, you can blend it, or if you didn't use it first or you use it first or whatever. It doesn't matter how, in what order you do your makeup, this would show up. This will not be patchy, and it does not give you any fallout. I mean, look at that black in the shade. Nothing, no fallout, nothing. It's absolutely beautiful. You can even see dips in it already. Look at that. That's how much I've used this black. I literally pull it out now anytime I have to darken my corner in any particular look and I don't have black in that palette. This is the first thing I pick. So these 3 palettes were the first palettes I used in 2022. Alright, that's all about my eyeshadow palettes according to the tag. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you've enjoyed this video, please like it, share it, and if you're not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe to my channel. I would love to have you on this channel. And until next time, I'll see you.